Hello and welcome to Sounds Heal Podcast. I am your host, Natalie Brown, and thank you so much for joining me as we continue to explore the fields of sound healing, sound therapy, and generally the use of sound for health and wellness. Today's conversation is one I've been looking forward to for quite some time. We are joined by Tom Kenyon, a pioneering figure in the field of sound and consciousness. Tom is the founder of Acoustic Brain Research, where he has explored the effects of sound on the brain and nervous system for decades. With a background in psychotherapy and a lifelong study of spiritual traditions, his work bridges psychoacoustics, human consciousness, and the transformative potential of sound. He is also known for his extraordinary vocal work, using complex harmonics and overtones as a means of influencing awareness, and for his extensive body of recordings, writings, and teachings that have reached listeners around the world. Many of you may also be familiar with him through his documentary Song of the New Earth, which is how I discovered him, and it offers a glimpse into both his life and his work with sound as a catalyst for inner experience. In this conversation, we explore Tom's early path, the evolution of his voice as an instrument, and his perspective on how sound affects the brain and consciousness. We also move into deeper questions around what science currently understands and where it may still fall short, as well as the role of discernment, responsibility, and lived experience in working with sound. Throughout this episode, you'll hear excerpts of Tom's music woven into the conversation. One of the pieces featured is The Cave of Altruin, a Hathor track in which all of the sounds, including Tom's voice and what may sound like a keyboard, were created by him through multi-tracking. And at the end of the episode, you'll hear a full piece titled Hymn to the Earth, which offers a beautiful example of his use of overtones within composition. This is a thoughtful and expansive conversation that touches both the science and the mystery of sound. Okay, welcome in Tom Kenyon. It is an honor to have you here. Thank you so much for saying yes.
My pleasure.
I know this is a big question, having followed you for a while, so just answer this whatever comes up. But can you take us into the early arc of your life and share a few pivotal moments that shaped your path with sound and spirit?
How much time do we have here?
Right.
So I'll try to compress it. When I was a child, like I'm thinking 3, 4 years old, 5 years old, my father made me a swing from a giant oak tree, and I would go there and swing and sing. And my favorite time was twilight. And I would sing to the stars and the moon. And I thought in my childhood mind that they could actually hear me and I could hear them sing back to me. We know now from neurology from one perspective is delusional, but from another perspective, we know that the brain mind can access other realms. So as I left that behind, that thought that I could sing to the stars and the moon and plants and animals. And then as I progressed into sound healing, I start return to it. And now I'm back singing to the stars and the moon and the plants and the animals. And I feel them respond. But of course, I'm accessing a non-dominant part of my brain, which we can get into later. The main pivotal thing that happened for me when I was 18, I was in the summers, I got to spend it with my uncle on his farm, and I baled hay. I was a farm hand, and I loved it to be in nature. And one day I was walking across my uncle's farm, 18 years old. It was in the afternoon, and I suddenly sat underneath a huge tree and felt compelled. My eyes closed, my hands went into a mudra. I did not know what a mudra was. I was 18. I was a white boy from North Carolina, and I didn't know what mudras were, but my legs went into a half lotus, and I lost awareness of the world. I went into what is called samadhi, a light samadhi. But in that state, there was such a sense of peace and interconnectedness and pure awareness and no suffering. And when I woke up, the sun was setting. So I had to have been sitting there for hours. I thought I was there for just a few minutes. And there were cows in the pasture, and they all came up and were looking at me, chewing their cud. I would have loved to know what they were thinking. What was going on in their minds as they see this white boy in samadhi. And so it drove me because I had a Christian background, I went into Christian mysticism, and I went deeply into the mystics of the Catholic tradition. And then it spilled over into ancient Egyptian alchemy and Hinduism and Taoism, the whole thing that I'm working on. And it all merged with neurology because I was fascinated by neuropsychology, and I was training to do that. And so I started to look at these other realms from the standpoint of neuropsychology. What's going on in the brain? What's going on in the nervous system and a person's belief system that allows that to happen? So that was the foundation for the rest of my work is like, what was this experience? And it is innate to all human beings. And so I love sharing that information with people because it opens another doorway.
Yes, and so you were already using your voice, singing to the sun and the moon. I'm curious, your evolution with your voice. How has your relationship to your voice evolved over the years? Were you musical as a child, and just how did that come about?
Well, my mother was an extraordinary singer. She was a contralto, and she had such a mastery of sound that when she sang a hymn, if it was emotional, people were crying, sobbing, they couldn't help it. That's the power of sound. So I think that's in my DNA. It's a gift from my mother. Um, as it has evolved, when I started working with the Hathors, they stretched my vocal range. Um, I was probably at 2.5 octaves. Now I'm at 3.5 octaves, sometimes 4 octaves, depending on the energetics. And that was a result of them expanding my viewpoint, my physiology, and my vocal cords. So that's the progression of woo-woo into science and back into woo-woo.
Right, right. Yeah, and the range is just, well, not just the range, but the overtones, the harmonics, I think, have such an influence. What do
Mhm.
you think, at least from your experience, and of course, the people that you've worked with and what they've said to you, what role do you think the overtones, the harmonic complexity play in
A
influencing
huge,
our consciousness, really? Yeah.
a huge role. Um, in that when you have these overtones, sometimes the overtones don't classically musically fit, but they're moving energy. And so when the overtone moves from something that might be constrictive to an expansive overtone, the neurophysiology responds. And then the people report to me they feel an expansion taking place or something definitely occurs for them when I go into the overtone chanting.
Absolutely. And what do you think it is about the voice that creates these shifts, right? I know you also use other instruments, but
Mhm.
what do you think it is about the voice that
Well,
alters our awareness?
I became friends with Valerie Hunt, Dr. Valerie Hunt, who was the first person to document scientifically the existence of the chakras. So that is not woo-woo anymore. It's hard science. But our culture, of course, has not caught up with that information yet. So Valerie Hunt was the preeminent person in this field. And we had several encounters. And she was came to the island where I live. She was really exhausted from touring so much and really exhausted. So I offered a sound session. And after we were done, she felt better. And she said, you know, the human voice is the most powerful healing instrument on the planet. That was her opinion. I think that the human voice can bring the totality of a person into sound. And if the person is connected to other realms of consciousness, they can bring those realms in. And when those realms interconnect, the human realm and what we'll call the transcendent, I call it the great mystery. I don't call it God or spirit, I just call it the great mystery because it's mysterious. But when you align with those energies, higher energies, that also gets communicated through the voice. And so that can have a truly profound effect on the neurophysiology and the mental state of the person. And this, of course, goes back to cymatics, the whole field, where it's shown that sound actually changes the structure of matter. And it does that in our subtle energy body and in the fascia, the interconnective tissue.
Yeah, I'd love to get into the science a bit more and what you're explaining. Maybe let's start with acoustic brain research and you
Mhm.
founding that. What were you trying to understand about sound when you founded that?
I was a psychotherapist, was trained in psychology, and I trained in Ericksonian medical hypnosis. So I was working with clients. This was in the very early 80s, and some research had just come out about the Lozanoff Institute. And the Lozanoff Institute, Dr. Lozanoff demonstrated that classical music, largo movements out of Baroque music, would increase alpha activity. This was incredibly dynamic information at that time. Now we've gone even further, but then I started playing classical music to my clients in critical points in therapy, and it facilitated because it relaxed them and allowed things to come up that normally might not come up. And because I'm a musician, I decided to play around and create my own music, Largo movement to create alpha and create. So I played it for my clients, and they all preferred that over the classical. That was just because I was familiar. I think that's really what's going on there. And so then it was clear to me that the adding sound, the sound element in music to therapy was a dynamic, powerful thing to offer, but there was no understanding. There was no science. Lozanoff Institute was the only thing that happened at that point. So I started doing research called, and I formed acoustic research for that purpose. One of my favorite stories about brain research, which affected the trajectory of my work. This was Dr. Wilson at a university. I got a letter from him. This is before email. We're talking about mid 80s. He was a professor of neurophysiology, and he was doing a lecture on music. And he said, music can increase alpha activity, but it cannot increase theta activity. And a student of his said, Professor, I have something right here. It's a cassette tape. This is before CDs. And he said, well, let's come up. And what I love about Dr. Wilson is that he engaged the scientific method in that moment. He didn't say, this is bullshit. He brought him up. He brought another student up so that he wouldn't be conditioned, hooked him up to an EEG, and he ran the test. And he said, something's wrong with the machine. This cannot be right. So he dismissed the class. He tried to find what was wrong with the machine. He couldn't find anything wrong with the machine. He called the company, and a rep came out and checked it out and said, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with the machine. So then another class, he brought somebody new in, same result, same result. And it blew him out of the water because I love how science and human psyches interact. So he's a very impeccable scientist, neurophysiologist, but he had been studying yoga and had read the sutras of Patanjali. And so he knew about the chakra system and he knew about the crown chakra. It just so happens accidentally that the crown chakra corresponds with one of the electrodes in classical EEG. You put one of the electrodes on the top of the head. And what happened was there was a sudden burst of theta at the crown chakra. And that made him wonder what on earth is going on. I actually have here his a copy of his EEG because I did a presentation the other day. This is the actual EEG printout that he sent me. And what it shows is at the top, a huge burst of theta activity, which is associated, as he said, and I'll read his actual notes here. So maybe this is back in the 80s. There's significant change in the power of theta, and an organization arrived at FZ, excuse me, crown chakra, often seen in states of joy, out-of-body experiences, and also common to strong hands-on healing. That blew his mind and sent him in a course and sent me in a course where science and woo-woo, for lack of a better term, can nest together. And that's what my work is really about. Sound is just a vehicle to help people access the resources that they have inside.
Because it is that balance of science wanting to have data and then the woo-woo, the unknown. I mean, this is kind of a big question, but I think it boils down to what do we know and what don't we know? What does the science show and maybe how does it limit? How does the framework of science limit what we know about
Well,
sound?
science is a limited activity. It's confined to a logical, sequential, linear, although it now some of the methodologies are getting more expanded. Um, the science shows unquestionably that sound can increase alpha activity, theta activity. It can create multiple brain states. It can affect the immune system, but that information is now just coming into where more researchers are looking at this. But there is a consensus of those who are looking at it at this point that sound with intention can heal. And the extent of that healing, we don't know. Based on my own experience, sound can, in the right circumstance, when the person is open to a deep level, profound healing can take place. And it can happen very rapidly. I'm surprised at how rapidly um, sound can facilitate healing. I don't think this type of work replaces medicine. I want to be clear about that. But it is an adjunct. It is a helpful thing.
What have you seen? You know, we're talking about brainwave states and that it can slow you down. You can get into deep meditation and really altered states. But any examples of significant healing that you've seen just from experience?
Yeah, one of my favorite stories was this was back in the 80s again, and a woman was trapped. She got in the jungle of Mexico, and there were no roads, nothing, and she had a gallbladder attack. And it was the worst thing she said she'd ever experienced in her life. And she couldn't there was nowhere to go. She happened to have a cassette tape of mine called Psychoimmunology, and she played it, and it stopped the gallbladder attack. And what I think happened was it was a combination of the sound patterns and the placebo effect. Because she believed that these sounds would heal her at a deep level in her consciousness, it did that. I think if that she had believed a vanilla wafer had the power to heal her, and she believed that with totality in the depth of her psyche, I think she might get some healing out of that. So one of the things that we're looking at, and the researchers that are looking in the field of neuropsychology and psychoimmunology, is that when you believe something strongly, the placebo effect kicks in and it affects pharmaceuticals, not just woo-woo. So how the thought and beliefs we hold have a effect on how our brain operates, how our immune system operates, and how we interface with the world.
Absolutely, that intentionality and that placebo effect is a good thing, right? Yeah,
It's a great thing.
yeah.
It's a difficulty in pharmaceutical research because they have to kind of mathematically discard it, but it's throwing out the baby in the bathwater. It actually speaks to the potential of human consciousness to change things in ourselves.
Do you know any like leading research right now? Anything happening right now that you've been looking into?
Ah, yes,
Okay.
biophotonics. Biophotonics is extraordinary. Biophotonics is a science that recently emerged. And they have scientifically measured and quantified. And of course, that's the golden standard in science. If you can't measure it and quantify it, might be interesting, but you can't really talk about it. They have quantifiably measured light is being emanated from every cell of our body. It's just such a low amplitude, we can't see it, but the instruments pick it up. Every organ has its own cluster of biophotons, and it has tremendous applications, including in industry. I'm not sure about the industrial application because I'm interested in the territory, but it's a vast thing opening up. So my takeaway from all that, from the science of biophotonics is we are a combination of light beings and material beings. That's the
Absolutely.
human paradox.
And you'll see that across cultures, have been
Mhm.
saying that, back into ancient traditions,
Yes.
and that a science is showing that now. That's amazing.
Yeah. There are
Wow.
amazing things happening in the fields of science,
Yeah.
especially in subtle energy research.
Well, let's switch gears from
Okay.
science into whatever we want to call the other side of this woo-woo, some people say. But a lot of this, again, is not as woo-woo as it may have used to have been. But I would love to hear, especially for listeners unfamiliar with this aspect of your work, the communication with the Hathors. How would you describe that relationship?
Strange. When they first came, I was like, it's a whole funny thing with them. Well, let me say in brief who they are, who they say they are, and who I think they are. So they say they're from another universe completely, outside this universe. They say there are multiple universes. And they came through Sirius, through the Stargate of Sirius, and went to Venus, where they are an interdimensional beings. They don't have physicality. They're in the ethers. And then they came to Earth in the golden age was the ancient period of Egypt, ancient Egypt. There's a book that if anybody's interested in reading about this, it's called Stalking the Wild Pendulum by Itzhak Bentov. And it's a small little book. He was a brilliant engineer who could see an engine in design and in his mind go into the future and see what the problems were and go back to his supervisors and say, this is going to happen at 5,000 hours of operation, and say, bring me the math. He didn't like math, but he would go back. He already had the insight, but he worked backwards mathematically to get to the equation that they would recognize. So he was a student of Muktananda, Swami Muktananda's. And he had these very deep mystical experiences. And in one of his experiences, which he talks about in the book, he saw that all universes were stacked like eggs in a carton. And the Earth and our entire universe was only one of those eggs. They're surrounding universes in that insight that he had. Whether that's true or not, who knows? But that's what the Hathors say. We live in another part of your egg carton.
I would love to hear how they came in. Like how did that hit you? And how did that influence you at that time, those first experiences?
Well, I was very resistant to them, and there's a whole story of how I wound up on from North Carolina on into the Northwest. We went to they said we needed to be near Mount Olympus, which is on the Olympic Peninsula, and they said whales will come. And so the only house we could find to rent was this little house by a canal. And one day I was out walking and there was a whale swimming up the frickin' canal. This is not open water. This is a canal connecting to the ocean. Then I started doing these weird things at night. My family would be asleep. And I would go on the back deck and start tracing these weird shapes. I didn't even know what they were. My body just took over. So my body wisdom and my mind is watching. It's like, what is this? And I realized what I was doing was shaping Platonic solids, which came out of the sacred mathematical tradition out of ancient Greece. So several days later, I was initiated a long time ago as a Siddhas yogi, and I went into that meditation retreat on my own. And after the first day, I felt psychically two beings in the room. Not physically there. I didn't see with my eyes, but I had the strong impression they were there. One never spoke. The first one spoke and he said, "We are the Hathors and we come with love and the sounding of a new reality for your earth." And he said, "We would like to teach you how to expand consciousness. We would like to teach you sacred geometry as a tool for expanding that consciousness." And they began to give me information and I tested it in myself. And it was like, holy this stuff works. So ever being the skeptic, because I have a very strong skeptical streak, I formed 3 beta test sites in the state of Washington, 3 different cities. I offered the training free. All I wanted to see was what happened. Everyone, without exception, had major emotional, physical transformations and even physical healings from doing the simple geometry. The last class, somebody said, "So where did this information come from?" And at that point, I was still very nervous about it. I said, "Oh, it came from the Hathors." That's just like threw it aside. I could go into the explanation of what happened for people, but essentially, everyone to some degree, some to an amazing degree, had a transformation and turnaround in their life just from working with the geometry. That really intrigued me. What's going on here? And there's, of course, a relationship between geometry and music and sound. It's all about relationships of frequencies.
And I'm curious, I know that for many people, including myself, seeing your documentary, Song of the New Earth, was really inspirational. It came at just a wonderful time for me and my journey. I would love for you to tell that story a bit. And what is the Song of the New Earth? What does that mean to you?
Well, the Hathors actually came to me. This is how it all started. Back we're talking about 20 some years ago. Yeah, 20 some years ago. 26 years ago, excuse me. They came to me and said, "We want you to go around the world and sing the Song of the New Earth." I said, "What in the fuck is the Song of the New Earth?" I was still resistant at that point with them. Not, I just feel like I can be myself with them. I don't have to pretend, "Oh, you're sacred beings from another realm. I will bow before you." They don't ask for that. They like engagement. So they said, "You will be sending sound codes into the earth, and you will have an experience where we will come to you on your next birthday." So this is my 35th birthday. I dropped my son off to Taekwondo, and we have something called Madrona Point, full of Madrona trees, and it's a native sacred land. It's extraordinary energy. So I just went there to hang out. All of a sudden, the ground opened up in front of me. Physically, it was so intense that my hands grabbed the grass to keep me from falling into the hole. I'm start falling into the earth. Meanwhile, my 2 parts of my brain are going on. The right side is pressing. Wow, this is really cool. This is wild. What's happening here? The left brain, what the fuck is going on? Dude, stop it, stop it. And they were laughing. We're not going to stop it. We have something to show you. So I drop deeper down. On the way down, I see these shamans with these drums circling me. And they said, "Will you sing the song of the new earth when you come back?" I said, "Come back from where?" "You'll see." Boom, 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 boom. And then I dropped deeper down and I'm surrounded by Aborigines. And they're doing this thing. "Will you sing the song of the new earth when you come back?" I said, "I don't know." Then I dropped down into it's from my intellectual standpoint, this is crazy talk, but I'm just reporting what my experience was. I'm in the center of the earth and there's like luminous egg type being. And it says to me, "I am the earth dreamer. I dreamed this earth into existence. I'm about ready to change the dream. Will you sing the song of the new earth?" And I said, "I'll think about it." That's a very important thing I have found in my interactions with beings, all different levels. Always filter it through your own values, your logic, see if it makes sense, and don't jump to yes, and don't jump to no too soon. Just kind of hang out in it. So I came back up, and while I was down, totally disconnected from the earth, 2 people had wandered very close to me and sat like 6 feet away, maybe, a guy and a woman, very young, and they're there for an amorous encounter because there's not many people in Madrona Park. And so they're kissing. He takes off his shirt. She starts to unbutton her blouse, and I'm panicking because oh, they're going to turn around and say, I'll have to say, I'm not a pervert. I was here first. So, and it was beautiful because the guy was just, going for it. The woman sensed that something was off. That's the power of the feminine mind. The feminine mind is, and men have it too, but it's suppressed. But the feminine aspect of consciousness is we're multidimensionally. She knew without knowing consciously that that was not the right place to do this. So she said, let's go. And so they moved on down. And so then the Hathors came to me and said, will you sing the song of the new earth? I said, yes. Then the other part of the story is how it all started was actually through my wife, Judy. So we were in a house, and the washing machine and dryer were in a little room, and that's where the kitty litter was. And I had two teenage sons, and the big conflict we had was they wouldn't change the kitty litter often enough. So Judy is coming down. The phone is ringing, and this is something she would have never done because that phone number was for Acoustic Brain Research, which was not really working at that point. We were not really doing anything. She runs into the dining room and slides across the floor on the kitty litter because my sons haven't changed it. And she picks up the phone and says, hello. And she says, is this Tom Kenyon? She says, no, but I can get him for you. And I said, we would like to know if he would come to Germany to teach. And as soon as the word hit, all these other countries said, we're here coming to Germany. We come here, Spain, France, Yugoslavia, all types of places, and England and Scotland. And each of those places, and Asia, each of those places, the Hathors had me sing a song to that area of the earth, and they were always different. They were all different. They had something calming and luminous about them, but the sound patterns were different. I'm assuming that's because the energetic structure of that area was different.
Absolutely. The grids, right? The energy
Yes.
centers of those areas. So, wow, that's just amazing. And in the documentary, you can see that indeed you did travel the world,
Yeah.
singing the song of the new earth. So, I guess, years later now, what have you learned about, I mean, what does new earth mean to you?
That's a really good question. And I would say I'm still forming my answer. Um, we're in a very precarious position energetically on the planet for multiple reasons. The Earth itself is at risk. Life itself is at risk. This is like and so the skeptical part of me goes, oh, man, this is just the way it is. The other part of me understands that from an alchemical perspective, collectively, what we are doing is burning out the dross. So this evil, nasty stuff is just coming out, and it can overwhelm you and send you into shock and depression if you pay too much attention to it. That happens for me. I have to really watch what I listen to. But alchemically, that is an extrusion of toxicity, and other peoples in other countries and other people in the United States, all over the world, are responding to that. And there's a shift taking place in people's attitudes. I can feel it at a subtle level. The Hathors say, we will get through this, and there will be a spiritual renaissance, and you will see the earth transformed right before your eyes. I hope that's true. The skeptic is still sitting on the fence. We'll see. But there's something going on that makes me hopeful, but it is a very subtle level at this moment in the world.
Mm-hmm. Now, with this intersection that you've really had to balance in your life of neuroscience and mysticism, what has surprised you the most about the true nature of sound?
I think perhaps we should have started this interview by me saying, I speak to you from my current level of misunderstanding, because sound is essentially a manifestation of a deeper vibratory field, in my experience. And that vibratory field is so vast and so interconnected. We do not even when we plummet the depths, we won't really understand because we can get glimpses, but the total picture, I think, would only come to a person who might be an avatar or a true bodhisattva or Buddha.
How much we don't know. Yeah. Yeah.
But we know enough to improve our lives and our inner worlds. That's really cool.
Absolutely. You know, and I think there's this interesting trajectory kind of happening with working with sound. And I'm just curious with this sound healing movement that's happening. I mean, it's really booming. You
Mhm.
know, so many people grabbing a crystal bowl and giving it a go. Uh, what gives you hope when it comes to sound work, and perhaps what concerns you?
Yeah, both are there. Um, I'm seeing younger people coming to sound work, and they're bringing a different type of awareness and permeability. I'm seeing a growing number of researchers in hard science being attracted to looking at this. And I think that's going to be hopeful because of what that will emerge. A culture likes and needs scientific rigor in certain areas, and I think that will even add to it. My concern is that there are people coming into this field who really don't know what they're doing. I believe in curiosity. I think curiosity is how we get into a future place. But it's just the human condition. Some people who have no training will pick up a crystal ball, and because of who they are, they'll start doing the ball, and their intention will carry that energy in a beautiful, helpful way. Another person might pick up the crystal ball and not have that internal system of balances and integrity and desire to be compassionate. And they send an energy that's destructive because they don't even know what they're doing. That's my concern. But it's beyond, it has its own life. I just encourage people to look at the sciences on this and just as a companion on the journey, let's say.
Yeah, a little follow-up to that, I guess. If, you know, you could leave one essential understanding about sound for people getting into it or perhaps future generations of sound workers, what would it be?
If you go deep enough into the non-ordinary aspect of sound and you explore that territory deeply enough, you will discover that you are very similar to two deities in Hinduism. Not that you are the deities, I'm not saying that, but the mythology speaks to our human innate nature. And these are the two figures of Brahma and Sarasvati. Brahma is the god who uttered the sound Om. Om is the sound, the fundamental sound in this ancient tradition from which all that exists in this universe came out of. Brahma uttered that sound. Sarasvati, and he's located in the throat chakra. In yoga, the yoga systems, he's often in the throat center. Sarasvati is the giver of language. She's the feminine intelligence, vast in her understanding, and gave the gift of language. So sound and language together in the throat. That's the key to creation. So, to my future sound healers, I hope that you are now looking back at the mistakes we all made and you forgive us for our stupidity and you embrace the mystery. And Brahman Sarasvati will appear, maybe not as Brahman Sarasvati, maybe Joe and Sally. Some male female aspect will emerge in your throat, and it's the alchemy between the fundamental sound and language. That's a powerful joining.
Yeah, I think it's really important what you're mentioning there for people getting into this work and of course future generations. Uh, Surely we can strike a crystal bowl, explore a gong, but using your own voice and really being in meditation with that exploration, uh, perhaps is our most powerful tool to really understand what you were just saying.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of last question for you is what are you curious about right now, you know, with your continued learning? I don't know if you're making music right now, research, what is sparking your interest and time right now?
Yeah, I am creating some new recordings. They're on the website. So I can give you, if you're asking the question of the deeper aspect of myself, how I'm orienting, not the surface aspect of the deeper,
Yeah.
is that's what you're asking, right?
Yes. Yep.
In my own personal journey, how has
Yeah.
it affected my sound work? Okay.
Yeah.
So I am a Dzogchen and Vajrayana practitioner out of Tibetan Buddhism. I've had several lamas that I've learned from. And Dzogchen is a brilliant system, and it takes you into this system where you are aware in the world, but not vulnerable and connected to it. It gives you a wonderful sense of being in a space that is, although it is in the world, it is not of the world, and you can nest in that. It's very comforting. So I found that entire system very helpful. I have an issue with Buddhism in general because it's male dominated, patriarchal in some aspects. Now, I am seeing more female practitioners and lamas coming forward, so I have hope that this is going to change. Of all the different religions in the world, Buddhism is probably the most gentle in terms of the male-female dichotomy, but the male deities are represented. And for instance, there's something called Samantabhadra, who is in his correlation in Taoism is the yang element. He has a consort called Samantabhadre, which is the yin element, male, female. But the tradition that we've received as a practitioner, you will get a meditation and it's Om Samantabhadra, Hri. No mentioning of Samantabhadre, his consort. I don't get it. The Tantra of Buddhism and all essential alchemical systems is the balancing and the interaction of male and female. Maybe yes, sexually, but that's really not what it's about. It's energetically. And so my favorite story in this, and this is my favorite deity actually in that pantheon is Tara. Tara is the mother of all the Buddhas. She is the vast feminine aspect of wisdom. She has 21 aspects. Each is a different frequency of light. She's a very powerful being. We're talking about 1,000 or more years ago in Tibet. A girl was born. She was named Tara by her parents because Tara was a name that was given to, like Mary in the Christian traditions. And when she was born, the lamas in Lhasa knew that a new being had become enlightened. So they went to pay homage because in Tibetan Buddhism, classical Tibetan Buddhism, you pay homage to a being who's illuminated or enlightened. So they went to go, and it took a while. This is Tibet, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So it took quite a while. She had grown up to some extent by the time they got there. They came to her house and they were flabbergasted when a woman came out of the house. They couldn't grok it. It was not possible. Their eyes, they must have thought they were in some weird state that this cannot be. It was historically documented that one of the lamas said to her, now that you have become enlightened, you can reincarnate as a male. To which she said, I will always remain in the form of a woman. That is feminine power. So I think the Buddhist path for me has been a tremendous doorway. And there's something that needs to be tweaked, in my opinion. And I think we'll see it changing. I think we're in a process of change where the feminine has to come forward. Really, if you look at the world, the song of the world, of the earth, Gaia is feminine, a feminine consciousness. If we don't honor the feminine on all levels, we will pay a huge price, and we're paying that price right now. But in the midst of that chaos, I sense a subtle shift taking place from my lips to God's ears.
And where are you seeing that? Can you give some examples of where that balance is starting to come in?
The female lamas, female practitioners, advanced practitioners, there are some extraordinary ones I know. There's a woman practitioner on the island who's very advanced, and she does programs in the prisons, the federal prisons, to counsel and to give resources to the inmates. So I see more and more people like that are happen in all traditions, not just Buddhism. And there are, I think some men are recognizing that something's missing. And the feminine is part of it. And it may be about the actual relationship between men and women at the physical level, but it is at even deeper level in the psychic and subtle levels. So I think that's what the Song of the New Earth is really about.
Right. And this balance is just echoed and really much of what you've covered and talked about, this balance of science and art of all of this, the balance of the masculine and the feminine. It's something we're all discovering to find within ourselves.
Right.
Yeah, really, really powerful. Well, anything else you'd like to share? Something you have coming up next? Things that people can explore. Perhaps music you've released.
Well, the newest one, which is actually blows my mind, um, is called Purification, and it's the mantras of Tara, and engages 21 Taras, all 21 Taras, and creates a vortex of energy in your body that you feel physically. You can feel the light rotating. How it came to be was I do one-on-one psychotherapy online, and one of my clients had the worst trauma. I mean, she was so traumatized sexually and emotionally. We don't need to go into the details, but it was a messy thing. She'd been through all types of work. And so in our work, I said, I'm going to send you this new meditation. And I created it for her out of an archival file I had. And she said it just wiped the trauma away. So behaviorally, I said, did this last? She said, yeah, but and so she's working with it. And it's worked with three other trauma clients of mine, and they all have similar experiences. So it's called Purification. It's available as an MP3. It's on the website. All my work, I try to make it nominally like it's $9.95 for the MP3, and it has a lecture about or talk how to use it. So that is what I'm most excited about in my work right now, to see how people are responding to this.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'll be sure to put a link directly to that in the show notes. Would I be able to insert? Is there, something you've created, maybe just a snippet of that or
Yeah,
some overtone
absolutely.
examples, anything that I could just
Yeah,
insert throughout just a little bit.
I'll send you a link. I'll send you
Okay.
hearing is believing, as the old saying.
That's it. That's right. Yeah, experiential. Well, thank you so much, Tom. It has been phenomenal to connect with you. I'm so inspired by your work and the gift that you've brought us all that have connected with your voice and your teachings. And thank you so much for continuing to share uh, just your profound work and truly the path that has led you to all of this is
Okay.
fascinating.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the questions. I wish we had more time. I could go on and on and on.
I know, I'm sure we could. Maybe a part two one day. Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye. Be well. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Sounds Heal Podcast. You can keep up to date with what's coming up next at soundshealstudio.com, on the YouTube channel for podcasts and music at Sounds Heal Studio, on Instagram at Natalie Brown Sounds Heal, and Facebook, Sounds Heal Studio. Be well and stay tuned.